They called him Quick Draw mockingly at first, the rookie sheriff who got his badge through what they assumed was pure luck. Some whispered that his father's connections in the state police paved his way. Others thought the town council was desperate after losing their last 3 sheriffs to early retirement. But here's something the Red Riders gang didn't count on. Sometimes the deadliest shot is the one they don't see coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Millbrook Valley wasn't the kind of place that made headlines. Tucked between rolling prairies and dense forests, it was a town where the morning fog carried the scent of fresh coffee from Linda's Diner and the sound of farmers' trucks rumbling down Main Street. For generations, the biggest excitement came from high school football games and the annual Harvest Festival. That changed the day the Red Riders rolled in. Sheriff Michael "Mike" Reynolds stood at his office window, watching the sunrise paint the town square in shades of amber and gold. 3 weeks into his position as the youngest sheriff in Millbrook's history at just 29, and already facing what could be the biggest crisis the town had seen since the Great Flood of '89. His reflection stared back at him, clean-shaved, determined brown eyes and a badge that some folks said he'd gotten more through politics than merit. "Another business hit last night, Sheriff," Deputy Sarah Martinez announced, dropping a fresh case file on Mike's desk. The veteran officer's voice carried that familiar edge of doubt, the same skepticism he'd been fighting since day one. The Henderson's hardware store. Red Riders tagged it with their signature skull mark. 4th one this month. People are starting to wonder if maybe you're not quite ready for this. Mike picked up the file, jaw tightening as he studied the photos. The Hendersons weren't just business owners. They'd given him his first job when he was 15, stocking shelves after school. The images showed shattered windows, shelves knocked over, and that blood-red skull spray-painted across the store's vintage American flag, a deliberate insult to Old Man Henderson's military service. "They're getting bolder," Chief Deputy Frank Thompson observed, his weathered face grim as he joined them. 25 years on the force had left silver streaks in his dark hair and deep lines around his eyes. Started with vandalism, moved to extortion, now they're attacking places that mean something to the community. State police called again. They're offering support. The suggestion hung in the air like gun smoke, a subtle vote of no confidence wrapped in professional courtesy. Mike spread the crime scene photos across his desk, eyes moving with practiced precision. Where others saw random destruction, he saw patterns. His time as a military marksman hadn't just taught him how to shoot. It had taught him how to read situations, to see the story behind the chaos. "No," he replied firmly, tapping one particular photo. "The Red Riders are making a mistake, and calling in outside help would only prove what they're trying to tell this town, that we can't handle our own problems." "Enlighten us, rookie." Martinez leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "What could you possibly see that 30 years of combined law enforcement experience is missing?" Mike pointed to the skull tag. "Look at the spray pattern. Their usual artist, Joey Flash Martinez. No relation to you, Sarah. He's right-handed. We know this from security footage at the gas station incident last week. This tag was painted by someone left-handed." He grabbed a ruler, making quick measurements. "And the height, Flash, is 6 feet, 2 inches. This was sprayed by someone much shorter, around 5 feet, 8 inches. Thompson leaned in closer, his skepticism giving way to curiosity. "Go on? What else?" "The Red Riders are splintering," Mike continued, pulling up photos from previous incidents. "These aren't coordinated attacks anymore. They're internal power plays. Marcus the Blade Rodriguez is challenging Derek Black's leadership. That's why these hits are getting messier, more frequent. They're not just trying to intimidate the town, they're trying to prove themselves to each other." The conversation was interrupted by Linda burst into the office, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by barely contained anger. "Sheriff, they just threatened my boy. 2 of them at the diner said if I don't start paying protection money, they'll make sure Tommy never makes it to baseball practice again." The diner wasn't just any business, it was Millbrook's heart. 3 generations of townfolk had grown up eating Linda's famous apple pie. The Red Riders had just crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Mike stood, checking his holster with practiced efficiency. The same motion he'd performed thousands of times during his years as a competitive shooter, long before he'd ever pinned on a badge. "They think I'm a joke," he said quietly. "A rookie sheriff who got lucky. But every time they underestimate me, they make another mistake. And this time, they just made their biggest one yet." The morning crowd at Linda's diner had thinned to a few regulars when Mike pushed through the door, the bell's cheerful jingle contrasting with the tension in the air. Old-timers nursed coffee cups, speaking in hushed tones about the Red Riders' latest threats. The usually bustling establishment felt subdued, like a storm was brewing just beyond the horizon. "Well, if it ain't Quick Draw himself," a gravelly voice called out. Marcus the Blade Rodriguez sat at the counter, leather vest adorned with the Red Rider's skull patch, a half-eaten plate of eggs before him. 2 other riders flanked him, their motorcycles parked prominently outside the window. "Heard you been studying our artwork, Sheriff. Fancy yourself a critic." Mike moved deliberately, positioning himself with clear sight lines to all 3 men. His posture seemed relaxed, but any trained observer would notice his right hand stayed free, his boot heels planted firmly for quick pivoting. "Just admiring the technique, Marcus. Though I noticed your boys are getting sloppy. Might want to coordinate better with Flash next time." Rodriguez's eyes narrowed, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "You got a smart mouth for a rookie. Maybe that's why Derek thinks you're more trouble than you're worth." "Tommy, go help your mama in the back," Mike called out to Linda's son, who was stacking plates behind the counter. The teenager hesitated, then caught the sheriff's stern look and disappeared into the kitchen. The diner had gone silent, the remaining customers watching the exchange with wary eyes. "Sending the kid away?" Rodriguez smirked, standing slowly. "Afraid he might see something unpleasant?" "Just making sure he doesn't have to testify about what happens next," Mike replied evenly. "You threatened a child today, Marcus, in my town. Did Derek authorize that? Or are you freelancing now?" The question hit like a precision shot. Rodriguez's companions exchanged glances, uncertainty creeping into their postures. Mike pressed the advantage. "See, companions." Rodriguez's face contorted with rage. "Or what, Quick Draw? You're gonna show us that famous speed we keep hearing about?" Mike's response was so quiet the bikers had to lean in to hear. "Marcus, if you reach for that gun under your vest, you'll find out exactly why they gave me that nickname before I ever became a sheriff." Something in his tone, perhaps the absolute certainty, or maybe the complete lack of bravado, made Rodriguez hesitate. His eyes met Mike's and saw something that made him step back. Without breaking eye contact, he pulled out his wallet, dropped some bills on the counter, and muttered what might have been an apology in Linda's direction. As the bikers filed out, their bravado notably diminished. Thompson moved beside Mike. "You knew they wouldn't draw. How?" Mike watched through the window as the motorcycles roared to life. "Rodriguez likes to project strength, but he's cautious. More importantly, he just confirmed something I suspected. Derek Black didn't authorize these escalations, which means the Red Riders are about to have some internal problems we can use to our advantage." Linda emerged from the kitchen, Tommy close behind her. "Sheriff, she began, but Mike raised a hand. "Linda, I need you to close early today. Then I need you to call a town meeting. It's time Millbrook Valley understood what we're really dealing with, and what we're going to do about it." Thunder rolled in the distance as dark clouds gathered over the prairie. A storm was coming to Millbrook Valley, but Mike Reynolds had learned long ago that sometimes the best way to weather a storm was to ride straight into it. The town hall meeting was packed, every seat filled with people standing along the walls of the old brick building. The afternoon storm had broken, leaving the air heavy with anticipation. Mike stood at the podium, surveying the faces before him. Farmers, shopkeepers, teachers, all of them looking to their young sheriff for answers. 3 months ago, Mike began, his voice carrying to every corner, the Red Riders thought they found an easy target. A small town with a rookie sheriff. Last week they hit 4 businesses. Yesterday they threatened a child. Today they learned that Millbrook Valley isn't as soft as they thought. He moved to a large map pinned to the wall, marked with red dots showing every incident since the gang's arrival. But what they don't know is that every act of intimidation, every show of force, has been giving us exactly what we need to take them down. Deputy Martinez stepped forward, distributing photos and documents to the town council. The Red Riders aren't just a gang, she explained, her earlier skepticism replaced by professional focus. They're a criminal organization in the middle of a power struggle. Derek Black, their leader, built them on a twisted code of honor. No targeting families, no excessive violence, but Marcus Rodriguez is trying to change that. Which means, Thompson added to, they're getting sloppy, making mistakes. And our sheriff here has been documenting every single one. Mike clicked through a series of surveillance photos on the projector. They think they're watching us, but we've been watching them. Every protection payment they've collected, every threat they've made, it's all evidence. But we need your help to spring the trap. Old man Henderson stood up, his military bearing still evident despite his years. What kind of help, Sheriff? Because I've got my shotgun ready. Not that kind, Mike replied firmly. The Red Riders are expecting violence. They're counting on it. What they don't expect is a community that stands together. Linda, tell them about your idea. Linda rose, clutching her apron. The diner's always been neutral ground. Everybody eats there. Ranch hands, bankers, even those bikers. I'm offering to host a town fair next weekend. Free food, live music, the works. The kind of event that'll draw everyone out. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the crowd. Mike raised his hand for silence. The Red Riders will see it as a sign of weakness. A town trying to pretend everything's normal. They won't be able to resist making a statement. But here's what they don't know. He nodded to Officer Jake Wilson, who wheeled out a large case. Inside were sophisticated surveillance equipment and communication devices. Before I became a sheriff, Mike explained, I specialized in rapid response tactics. Every vendor at that fair will be an off-duty officer from surrounding counties. Every food truck will house surveillance equipment. And when Rodriguez makes his move against Derek Black's leadership, we'll have everything on camera. You're using us as bait? Someone called out. No, Mike corrected. I'm asking you to show them what they've never understood. That real strength isn't about fear. It's about community. Every time they've attacked, this town has pulled together. Now we're going to use that unity to end this. He outlined the security measures, the evacuation plans, the coordination with state police who would be positioned just outside town. But more importantly, he explained how each business owner, each resident, had a part to play in maintaining the illusion of a town too naive to realize it was walking into a confrontation. There's something else, Thompson added. Something the Red Riders don't know about our sheriff. Want to tell them, Mike? Or should I? Mike hesitated, then nodded. Before I took this badge, I held the state record for competitive shooting. They call me Quick Draw as a joke, but there's a reason I earned that nickname in the first place. I've been downplaying it, letting them think the stories were exaggerated. Next weekend, if Rodriguez forces a confrontation, he's going to learn differently. The meeting continued late into the evening. Questions answered, concerns addressed, roles assigned. As people filed out, there was a new energy in the air. Not the nervous tension of recent weeks, but the quiet determination of a community that had found its strength. Linda lingered behind, Tommy at her side. Sheriff, are you sure about this? Using my diner as the centerpiece? Mike checked his weapon, a habit that had become almost unconscious. The Red Riders think they understand power. They're about to learn that real power isn't in how many people fear you. It's in how many stand beside you. Thunder rumbled again, distant but clear. In 6 days, Millbrook Valley would either break free from the Red Riders' grip, or... Mike pushed the alternative from his mind. Failure wasn't an option, not with his town counting on him. The pieces were in motion. The trap was set. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, 2 rival gang leaders were about to make the biggest mistake of their lives, underestimating a sheriff who had been 3 steps ahead of them all along. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The week before the town fair passed like a slow-motion chess game. Mike watched from his office window as Linda's staff hung colorful banners across Main Street, their cheerful messages masking the tension beneath. His desk was covered with surveillance photos, incident reports, and a detailed map of the fairground layout. Red Riders spotted at the county line, Deputy Martinez reported, entering with fresh intel. 8 bikes, including Rodriguez and Flash. Derek Black's group was seen heading in from the opposite direction, looking like your prediction about their split is dead on. Mike nodded, checking his sidearm for the 100th time that morning. The familiar weight of his competition-grade Colt 1911 offered small comfort. And our backup? State police units are positioned at all approach routes, disguised as road maintenance crews. FBI tactical team is standing by 20 minutes out. Undercover officers are setting up their vendor booths now. She paused, studying him. You really think Rodriguez will make his move against Black here? He doesn't have a choice, Mike replied, marking another position on the map. Black's been asking questions about the unauthorized hits, the escalating violence. Rodriguez needs to make a show of force before his support crumbles. What better way than taking over in front of the whole town? Thompson entered, his weathered face grave. Just got word from our informant inside the gang. Rodriguez has been promising his supporters bigger cuts of protection money, less oversight. He's got maybe 15 riders ready to flip on Black. But here's the concerning part. They've been asking around about explosives. Mike's jaw tightened. He'd anticipated violence, but this raised the stakes considerably. They're not just planning a confrontation. Rodriguez wants to make a statement, something public, something that shows Millbrook Valley what happens to towns that resist. Linda burst in, her usual calm shattered. Sheriff. 2 of Rodriguez's men just left the diner. They were talking about making sure tomorrow's fair is one nobody will forget. They didn't know Tommy was in the back, heard everything. They're planning something big at the bandstand. That's what I'm counting on, Mike said, pulling out architectural plans of the fairground. Linda, remember how we reinforced your diner's basement last week? We didn't just do that for storage. He turned to his team, energy radiating from his lean frame. Rodriguez thinks he's planning a coup. What he doesn't know is that every step he takes brings him closer to a trap 6 months in the making. Officer Wilson? Jake Wilson appeared, carrying cases of communication equipment. Surveillance systems are in place, Sheriff. Every vendor booth has cameras with thermal imaging. Motion sensors cover all blind spots. If anyone so much as sneezes wrong tomorrow, we'll know about it. Mike moved to the evidence wall where photos tracked the Red Riders' activities since their arrival. Tomorrow isn't just about stopping a gang war. It's about showing Millbrook Valley, and every town like it, that you don't need an army to stand against intimidation. Sometimes all you need is a community willing to stand together, and a sheriff crazy enough to use a town fair as bait? Martinez finished, but there was respect in her voice now. They call me Quick Draw like it's a joke, Mike said quietly, checking his backup weapon. By tomorrow night, they'll understand why that name used to make other competitive shooters forfeit matches rather than face me on the range. Thunder rolled across the prairie as the team dispersed to final preparations. Mike remained at the window, watching storm clouds gather over Millbrook Valley. Tomorrow would test not just his skills with a gun, but everything he believed about community, justice, and the kind of courage it takes to stand against those who rule through fear. The rookie sheriff they'd all doubted was about to show the Red Riders exactly why you should never judge a person's capabilities by their years on the job. The morning of the town fair dawned bright and clear, the storm clouds of yesterday replaced by deceptively peaceful skies. Mike stood in the command center they'd established in Linda's reinforced basement, surrounded by monitors showing feeds from every camera positioned around the fairgrounds. All units check in, he commanded through the secure radio channel. Martinez at the north entrance, clear. Thompson covering the bandstand, in position. Wilson at the food court. All vendors accounted for. State police units standing by at all exit points. The fair was coming to life above them, the smell of popcorn and cotton candy drifting down even to the basement. Families began trickling in, their laughter a stark contrast to the tension humming through the law enforcement network. First Red Riders spotted, Martinez's voice crackled. Rodriguez's group, 8 bikes. They're splitting up, taking positions around the perimeter. Just like you predicted, Sheriff. Mike watched the thermal imaging screens tracking the bikers' movements. And Black? Coming in from the south, Thompson reported. Looks like he brought his whole crew. This could get ugly fast. Keep your positions, Mike ordered. Remember, we need them all in place before we move. Linda, how's the crowd control going? Linda's voice came through clear and steady. Reverend Parker's youth group is doing a good job keeping families toward the designated safe zones. Nobody suspects a thing. Mike checked his weapon one final time, the familiar motion centering him. Years of competitive shooting had taught him that the moment before action was often more dangerous than the action itself. That's when mistakes happened. Movement at the bandstand, Wilson called out urgently. Rodriguez's men are unloading something from their saddlebags. Thermals showing. Sheriff, those look like explosive components. Right on schedule, Mike replied, his voice deadly calm. Thompson, confirm Black's location. He's just past the cotton candy stand, heading straight for Rodriguez. Got at least 12 riders with him. Mike stood, adjusting his tactical vest beneath his uniform shirt. All units execute Phase 1. Martinez, start the music. The opening chords of a country song blasted through the fair's speakers, masking the sound of tactical teams moving into position. Through the monitors, Mike watched as Derek Black confronted Rodriguez near the bandstand, their body language screaming hostility, even without audio. They're arguing, Martinez reported. Rodriguez just shoved Black. Weapons spotted. At least 6 riders reaching for guns. Wait for my mark, Mike commanded, already moving up the basement stairs. Remember, we need to contain this before any civilians are at risk. He emerged into the sunlight just as the first shot rang out. The crack of gunfire cut through the music, followed by screams as fairgoers began running. But thanks to their preparation, the evacuation routes were clear, volunteer teams calmly guiding people to safety. Sheriff! Rodriguez's voice boomed across the fairground. You wanted to see real power? Watch what happens to towns that don't learn their place. Mike stepped into the open, his stance relaxed, but ready. Years of competition had taught him that tension was the enemy of speed. Marcus, he called out. I was hoping we could do this the easy way. The easy way? Rodriguez laughed, holding up a detonator. Like how you played us? Thinking we wouldn't figure out your little trap? Oh, I was counting on you figuring it out, Mike replied, his voice carrying across the now empty fairground. Just like I was counting on you bringing those explosives, the ones you bought from a supplier who works for us. Rodriguez's face contorted with rage and disbelief. He squeezed the detonator, but nothing happened. In that moment of confusion, Mike moved. Later, witnesses would say it was like lightning. One moment, the sheriff was standing still. The next, his gun had cleared leather and fired twice with impossible precision. The detonator shattered in Rodriguez's hand. His backup weapon went spinning away before he could even grip it properly. That's why they really called me Quick Draw, Mike said into the stunned silence. Now about that power you wanted to show the town? The trap had been sprung. The Red Riders were about to learn that sometimes the deadliest force isn't the one that makes the most noise. It's the one they never saw coming until it was too late. Time seemed to slow in the aftermath of Mike's shots. Rodriguez stared at his shattered detonator, blood trickling from where fragments had cut his hand. Around the fairground, both factions of Red Riders stood frozen, weapons half drawn, as they processed what they'd just witnessed. Those were warning shots, Mike announced, his voice carrying across the stunned silence. The next ones won't be. Everyone. Weapons down. Now. Derek Black was the first to move, but not to surrender. His hand flashed toward his vest. Kill this badge-wearing show-off. Mike's response was pure reflex, muscle memory from thousands of hours on the competition range. 3 shots rang out in rapid succession. Black's gun went flying, along with two others from his closest supporters. The weapons hit the dirt before the echo of the shots had faded. "That's 6 shots," Mike said calmly, his Colt still training steady. "I've got 9 more in the magazine, and I promise you, there's nobody here faster than me. So let's talk about what happens next." Martinez's voice crackled in his earpiece. "State police moving in from all sides. FBI tactical team 60 seconds out." "Your explosives are duds," Mike continued, addressing both gang leaders. "Your escape routes are blocked, and every single thing that's happened here is being recorded. But here's what you don't know yet. Your supplier, the one who sold you those explosives, he works for us, has been for months, and he's got recordings of every conversation, every plan, every detail of your operation." Rodriguez sneered, though his bravado was cracking. "You're bluffing, Quick Draw. No rookie sheriff pulls off something this big." Mike allowed himself a small smile. "That's your problem, Marcus. You saw what you wanted to see. A young sheriff, an easy target. You never asked why someone with my background would choose a small town like Millbrook Valley." Thompson emerged from his position, covering the left flank. "Tell them, Mike. Tell them why they call you Quick Draw in the circuit." 5 state championships," Mike replied, his aim never wavering. 2 national titles. The record for the speed shooting competition still stands. I could have gone professional, but I chose this instead. Because sometimes the best way to protect people isn't from behind a competition barrier. It's from behind a badge. The sound of sirens filled the air as state police vehicles converged on the fairground. FBI tactical teams deployed in practice formation, securing the perimeter. But Mike kept his focus on the gang leaders, knowing these next moments were crucial. "You've got 2 choices," he continued. "Surrender now. Face federal charges for attempted domestic terrorism, or—" He let the alternative hang in the air. Black broke first. "Stand down," he ordered his men, dropping his backup weapon. "This town ain't worth dying for." Rodriguez looked around wildly, seeing his power play crumbling. With a roar of rage, he lunged for a fallen gun. Mike's response was instantaneous. 2 shots, perfectly placed. The first knocked the weapon away. The second kicked up dirt inches from Rodriguez's reaching hand. 8 shots, Mike counted calmly. Still 7 left. Want to try for 9? The fight drained from Rodriguez's face. Around the fairground, Red Riders were raising their hands, accepting the inevitable. Martinez and Thompson moved in with handcuffs while FBI teams secured the explosive devices. Linda emerged from the diner's basement, Tommy close behind. "Sheriff," she called out, "the surveillance footage is secured, every second from every angle." Mike finally lowered his weapon, watching as the gang members were led away. The fair lay in disarray around them. Scattered popcorn, overturned stands, torn banners fluttering in the prairie wind. But no casualties, no civilian injuries. The plan had worked perfectly. "You know," Thompson said, joining him. "When they appointed you, I thought the town council had lost their minds. A hotshot competition shooter playing sheriff? But now I understand. You didn't just bring a quick draw to Millbrook Valley, you brought strategy, patience, and something these writers never understood." "What's that?" Mike asked, holstering his weapon. "The understanding that true power isn't about how fast you can pull a trigger. It's about knowing when you need to, and more importantly, when you don't." Thunder rolled in the distance, but this time it sounded more like applause. Millbrook Valley had faced down its threat, not just through the speed of its sheriff's draw, but through the strength of a community united against fear. In the days following the Red Riders' takedown, a deeper story began to emerge. Mike sat in his office reviewing interrogation reports, each new detail confirming his suspicions that there was more to this gang than met the eye. "Sheriff, you need to see this," Martinez said, bursting in with a stack of files. "We've been going through Rodriguez's phone records. The calls don't just go to other gang members. There's a pattern of communication with someone in the state government." Mike spread the phone logs across his desk, his tactical mind piecing together connections. "Look at the timing. calls to this same number right before they moved into each new town. Someone was feeding them intelligence, telling them which communities were vulnerable. Thompson entered, his face grave. It gets worse. FBI's forensic team found something interesting in those explosive components. They're military grade, the kind that doesn't just show up on the black market. Someone with serious connections was supplying them. Because the Red Riders weren't just a gang, Mike concluded, standing to study his evidence wall. They were a test run. Someone wanted to see how small towns would respond to organized intimidation. The question is, why? Linda appeared in the doorway, clutching a newspaper. "Maybe this is why," she said, dropping it on Mike's desk. The headline read, "State Emergency Response Bill Proposed. New Powers for Government Intervention in Local Law Enforcement." "Of course," Mike muttered, the pieces clicking into place. Create a crisis, then offer the solution. The Red Riders move in, terrorize small towns, and suddenly there's public support for state-level oversight of local police. "You're saying this goes all the way to the Capitol?" Martinez asked, incredulous. Mike picked up a photo from his desk, the Red Riders' skull symbol. "Look closer at the design, the art style, the precision. This isn't some biker gang tag. This is military psychological operations work. Someone wanted to make these towns feel helpless." Wilson rushed in, laptop in hand. "Sheriff, I've been tracing those encrypted communications. They bounce through servers across 3 states, but they all lead back to one location, the State Police Special Operations Division." "The same division that recommended me for sheriff," Mike said quietly. "They thought they were placing a naive competition shooter in charge, someone who'd fail spectacularly against organized crime. Instead, they got someone who specialized in tactical planning and threat assessment," Thompson finished. "Someone who could see the bigger picture." Mike moved to the window, watching his town recover from yesterday's chaos. The Red Riders were just foot soldiers. The real threat wears suits and sits in government offices. But they made one crucial mistake. "What's that?" Linda asked. "They assumed that because we're a small town, we'd be an easy target. They never understood that real strength doesn't come from state authority or gang intimidation. It comes from the community." The office door opened again, revealing FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen. "Sheriff Reynolds, we need to talk. Those connections you've uncovered, they go higher than you think, and you're not the only town they've targeted." Mike checked his weapon, a habit now charged with new meaning. "How many others?" 6 towns across 3 states, all hit by similar gangs, all facing the same pressure for state intervention. But Millbrook Valley was different. You didn't just stop their gang, you exposed their playbook. Thunder rolled across the prairie as Mike absorbed this information. The quick draw skills that had helped him take down the Red Riders wouldn't help against this enemy. This fight would require a different kind of speed, the rapid gathering of evidence, the swift building of alliances with other targeted communities. "They thought catching Rodriguez and Black was our endgame," Mike said, his voice steady despite the weight of the revelation. "But everything we've done, the community programs, the surveillance network, the trust we've built, it's given us something they didn't expect." "What's that?" Martinez asked. "A foundation to fight back, and this time we're not just facing thugs on motorcycles. We're up against people who hide behind badges and government seals." The rookie sheriff who had outdrawn the Red Riders was about to face a much deadlier game, one where the enemy smiled in press conferences and signed executive orders. The real war for Millbrook Valley's independence was just beginning. The atmosphere in the emergency town council meeting was electric. Mike stood before Millbrook Valley's leaders, laying out evidence of the conspiracy that had brought the Red Riders to their doorstep. "State Police Special Operations Division files," he announced, spreading documents across the council table. Every town they targeted followed the same pattern. First, a manufactured crisis. Then, conveniently timed proposals for state intervention. Councilwoman Eleanor Hayes, who'd served Millbrook for 30 years, studied the files with growing concern. "And you're saying someone in the state government orchestrated all this?" "Not just someone," FBI agent Chen interjected, pulling up surveillance photos. "Commissioner James Morgan, head of the State Emergency Response Committee. He's been pushing for legislation that would give his office direct control over local law enforcement in crisis situations. Mike pointed to a series of financial trails. The Red Riders' weapons, their intel, even their tactical training. It all traces back to shell companies connected to Morgan's office. They're using gang violence to justify a power grab. But why? Mayor Phillips demanded. What does he gain from controlling small-town police departments? Control, Mike replied grimly. Start with law enforcement, then emergency services, then local governance. Create enough crisis situations, and suddenly, state oversight becomes permanent. But Morgan made 3 critical mistakes. He moved to the evidence board, tapping key photographs. First, he assumed a competition shooter wouldn't recognize military-grade tactical planning. Second, he thought small towns would be isolated, easy to intimidate. And third, a commotion outside interrupted him. Deputy Martinez burst in, her expression urgent. Sheriff, state police just set up checkpoints on all roads into town. They're citing ongoing gang activity as justification. And there's the third mistake, Mike concluded. They're moving too fast, getting sloppy. Morgan's worried about what we've uncovered. Agent Chen's phone buzzed. Similar reports from other targeted towns. It's a coordinated effort to lock down potential evidence. Mike checked his weapon, mind racing through scenarios. Martinez, get our surveillance feeds backed up to secure servers. Thompson, activate our emergency communication network. They think they're containing us, but they've just proven everything we suspected. Linda rushed in, clutching her tablet. Sheriff, you need to see this. State News is running a story about ongoing criminal elements in Millbrook Valley. They're saying yesterday's incident proves we need state intervention. Of course they are, Mike said, his tactical training kicking in. They're controlling the narrative, but we've got something they don't expect. He pulled up a map showing connections between targeted communities. While they were watching us handle the Red Riders, we were building a network. Every town they hit, every sheriff they tried to undermine. We're all connected now. And we've got proof of their entire operation. Morgan's people will try to discredit it, Agent Chen warned. They'll call it conspiracy theories, small-town paranoia. Mike's response was cut short by the sound of helicopters overhead. State police tactical units were deploying around Millbrook Valley, their show of force visible through the council room windows. Let them come, Mike said quietly. Every move they make proves our case. The rookie sheriff they thought would fail against the Red Riders, he's about to show them that sometimes the quickest draw isn't with a gun, it's with the truth. Thunder rolled across the prairie as Millbrook Valley prepared for a different kind of showdown. This wasn't about outgunning criminals anymore. It was about exposing corruption that threatened the very heart of small-town America. The real test of Mike's abilities wasn't going to be his speed with a weapon. It would be his skill at turning Morgan's own tactics against him, using the very network of communities the commissioner had tried to intimidate as the weapon that would bring him down. Mike turned the sheriff's office into a command center, as state police encircled Millbrook Valley. Surveillance feeds showed tactical units positioning at every intersection, their presence a clear message of force. They're shutting down cell service, Martinez reported, monitoring communications. Landlines still work, but they're probably tapped. Good thing we planned for this, Mike replied, activating a hidden radio system. Agent Chen, what's the FBI's official position on this operation? Officially, they're claiming it's a joint task force responding to gang activity. Unofficially, half the Bureau is watching this closely. Morgan's overreach could expose years of corruption. Thompson burst in, face grim. State police are going door to door, claiming to search for remaining Red Riders. They're confiscating phones, computers, anything that might have evidence. Mike moved to his evidence wall, now hidden behind a false panel. Let them search. Everything important is already backed up to secure locations. Linda? Linda's voice crackled through the radio. My customers are spreading the word. Every piece of evidence, every recording is being copied and distributed through the old church basement network, just like we planned. Morgan's making his play, Mike observed, checking the feeds. He needs to control the narrative, make it look like Millbrook Valley is a hotbed of criminal activity justifying state intervention. But he's about to learn something about small towns. "What's that?" Agent Chen asked. "Information moves faster through church potlucks than government channels." Mike activated the emergency broadcast system they'd set up weeks ago. "All units execute Protocol Delta." Across Millbrook Valley, a coordinated response began. State police searching homes found nothing but ordinary citizens going about their business. Every computer they seized contained only mundane personal files. Meanwhile, the real evidence was moving through an underground network of neighbors, church groups, and community organizations. "Morgan's people are getting frustrated," Martinez reported, monitoring police channels. They expected to find proof of ongoing criminal activity. Instead, they're finding quilting circles and recipe exchanges. "Because they don't understand how small towns work," Mike explained. "They see us as backward, isolated. They never realized that when you try to intimidate a community like this, you don't just face law enforcement, you face generations of connections they can't trace or control." A state police captain demanded entry to the sheriff's office. Mike buzzed him in, his posture relaxed but ready. Captain Richard Drake strutted in, flanked by tactical officers. "Sheriff Reynolds," Drake announced, "by order of Commissioner Morgan, this office is now under state control. Surrender your badge and weapon." Mike's response was calm. "Interesting timing, Captain. Right after we uncovered evidence linking state officials to organized crime. Would you like to explain these?" He pulled up photos showing Drake meeting with Red Riders weeks before they arrived in town. The captain's face hardened. "You're interfering with a state investigation. This kind of resistance only proves the need for intervention." "No," Mike countered. "It proves exactly what we've been saying. This isn't about public safety. It's about power, and you've just walked into your own trap." On cue, Linda's voice came through the radio. "Sheriff, every local news station in 3 states just received copies of our evidence. Social media is exploding. State police harassment of small towns is trending nationwide." Drake's radio crackled with urgent messages. State police units were facing peaceful but determined resistance across town. Every attempt to suppress information only spread it faster through channels they couldn't control. "You still think this is about quick draws and gunfights?" Mike asked quietly. "The real power in Millbrook Valley was never in my holster. It's in a community that knows how to stand together. Now, Captain, would you like to rethink your position? Or should we discuss those meetings with the Red Riders on live television?" Thunder rolled across the prairie, but this time it sounded like victory approaching. The rookie sheriff they'd tried to silence was about to show them that in the modern age, the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun. It's the truth in the hands of a united community. Commissioner Morgan's face filled every television screen in Linda's diner, his emergency press conference broadcast statewide. "The situation in Millbrook Valley represents a clear threat to public safety," he declared. "The presence of organized crime elements necessitates direct state oversight." Mike sat at the counter, surrounded by his team, watching the commissioner dig his own grave. "What he doesn't know," Agent Chen said quietly, "is that while he's grandstanding, federal agents are executing search warrants across the state. Every shell company, every corrupt official, every piece of the network you helped us uncover." Mike holstered his weapon, the same one that had helped him stop the Red Riders, but it wasn't his quick draw that won this fight. It was the slow, patient building of trust, evidence, and community bonds. Thunder rolled across the prairie one last time, but now it sounded like applause. The rookie sheriff they'd tried to control had become the catalyst for exposing corruption that threatened small towns across America. And he'd done it not with bullets, but with the truth, and a community united behind it. 1 month after Morgan's arrest, Millbrook Valley hosted a different kind of gathering. Representatives from 20 small towns across the state filled the community center, each with their own story of resistance against corruption. "The final numbers are in," Agent Chen announced to the assembled crowd. 32 state officials indicted, 15 corrupt police commanders were arrested, over $50 million in seized assets from Morgan's operation. But the real story isn't in the numbers. Mike stood at the podium, his badge catching the morning light. The real story is how a network of small towns brought down a statewide criminal enterprise, not with gunfights, but with something stronger. Unity. Thompson stepped forward with fresh intelligence reports. Morgan's operation went deeper than we thought. They had similar plans for 3 other states, but guess what? Those plans are falling apart because every small town is now watching, connected, ready to stand together. "Tell them about the changes, Sheriff," Linda called from the crowd. Mike nodded, spreading out the new legislation drafts. The state assembly just passed the Community Protection Act. It guarantees local law enforcement autonomy, requires transparency in state interventions, and establishes an independent oversight committee, staffed by small-town representatives, Martinez added from her position by the door. And the FBI's new small-town defense unit? They're using our playbook, teaching communities how to spot corruption, build evidence, and protect themselves without losing their independence. The meeting continued as sheriffs and mayors shared their experiences, building a stronger network of resistance against corruption. But the most powerful moment came when a young deputy from a neighboring town asked the question everyone was thinking. "Sheriff Reynolds, you could have gone professional with your shooting skills. Instead, you chose to protect a small town. Why?" "Because it works," Martinez added. "Last month alone, 2 attempts at organized corruption were stopped before they could even get started. Communities recognized the signs, worked together, protected each other. Outside, the thunder rolled again, but now it carried a different message. Not a warning, but a reminder of how far they'd come. The rookie sheriff who'd outdrawn the Red Riders had helped create something that would outlast any single victory. A blueprint for communities standing strong against corruption, united in purpose and protected by truth. In Millbrook Valley, they still practice quick draws, but now they understand the fastest gun isn't always the strongest defense. Sometimes, the best protection comes from the slow, steady building of trust, the patient gathering of evidence, and the unshakable bonds of community standing together against any threat that dares to challenge their freedom. Mike moved to his evidence wall, now a teaching tool showing how community networks could overcome systemic corruption. Morgan thought he could use the Red Riders to break small towns. Instead, he showed us our strength. A group of trainees gathered outside his office, led by a familiar face, Anton Kovach's daughter, now a deputy herself. "Sheriff," she called out, "could you tell them the story? About how a competition shooter became the defender of small-town America?" Mike checked his weapon one last time, the motion now more symbol than necessity. "It's not my story," he replied. "It's the story of every small town that refused to be intimidated, every community that chose to stand together, every citizen who realized that true justice doesn't come from the fastest gun. It comes from the strongest hearts." Thunder rolled across the prairie, but now it sounded like a reminder of battles won and lessons learned. The rookie sheriff with the quick draw had become something more, a symbol of how communities could stand against corruption and win. In Millbrook Valley, they still tell the story of the sheriff who could outshoot any outlaw, but they also tell a deeper truth, that the quickest way to justice isn't always through the barrel of a gun. Sometimes it's through the united strength of people who refuse to let fear rule their towns. 1 year after the events that transformed Millbrook Valley, Mike stood at his familiar office window, watching sunrise paint the town square. The morning ritual carried new meaning now, not just watching for threats, but appreciating what they'd built. "Final statistics just came in," Agent Chen announced, entering with a comprehensive report. "The Community Defense Network now spans 200 towns across 5 states. Crime rates down 70% in participating communities, but here's the real success story. Public trust in local law enforcement at an all-time high." Mike holstered his weapon, the motion now more ceremony than necessity. "Because they finally understand what real protection looks like." Linda's voice carried from the street below, where she was organizing another training session. The diner had become a national hub for community policing education, teaching others what Millbrook Valley had learned through fire. Tell them about the international program, Thompson added, bringing in fresh files. Law enforcement delegations from 12 countries are studying our model. They're calling it the Millbrook Method, how small communities can defend themselves against systemic corruption. Mike moved through his office, now lined with photographs showing the transformation. Images of the Red Riders' defeat shared space with pictures of community gatherings, training sessions, and celebrations of unity. You know what Morgan never understood? Mike addressed the gathered deputies. He thought controlling small towns was about breaking their spirit. He never realized that spirit is what makes us strongest. A young officer raised her hand. But sir, what about your quick draw skills? Weren't they crucial to stopping the Red Riders? Mike drew his weapon with practiced grace, then slowly holstered it. The quick draw was just a tool. The real victory came from something stronger, a community that refused to be intimidated. That's the true legacy of Millbrook Valley. Thunder rolled across the prairie, but now it carried a different message. Not a warning of approaching storms, but a reminder of battles won and lessons learned. The rookie sheriff with the lightning draw had become something more, a symbol of how communities could stand against corruption and win. The next generation will face different challenges, Mike continued, watching new recruits train in the morning light. But they'll have something we didn't. A network of communities ready to stand together, share information, and protect each other. Martinez entered with breaking news. Just got word. The last of Morgan's network tried setting up in a small town in the next state. Didn't even last a week. The community recognized the signs, worked together, shut them down before they could get started. Mike nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. Because now they know. The fastest gun isn't always the strongest defense. Sometimes the best protection comes from neighbors looking out for neighbors, communities standing together, and the unshakable bonds of trust we build every day. In the years to come, they would tell stories about the sheriff who could outshoot any outlaw. But in Millbrook Valley, they knew a deeper truth, that true strength isn't measured by the speed of a draw, but by the courage of a community that refuses to let fear rule their lives. The thunder rolled one final time, like applause from the heavens themselves. The rookie sheriff, who'd arrived with nothing but a quick draw and a badge, had helped create something that would outlast any single victory. A blueprint for freedom, justice, and the unbreakable spirit of small-town America. A convoy of vehicles approached Millbrook Valley, but these weren't threats. They were law enforcement representatives from across the country, arriving for the first annual Community Defense Summit. Final part, legacy in motion. 5 years after the Red Riders' defeat, Millbrook Valley had become a beacon of community policing. Mike stood on the roof of the expanded law enforcement center, watching the sun rise over a transformed landscape. Final report on the national impact, Agent Chen announced. Over 500 communities have adopted the Millbrook method. Corruption investigations have exposed similar schemes in 15 states, but the numbers don't tell the whole story. Below, the town bustled with activity. The training center hosted law enforcement from 3 countries. Linda's Diner had become a hub for community organizing. The Quick Draw Academy, named despite Mike's protests, taught not just marksmanship, but community defense strategies. "Remember when they mocked you as Quick Draw?" Thompson mused, joining him. "Now it's a symbol of something bigger, how small towns can defend themselves against corruption." Mike checked his weapon one last time, the motion now pure ritual. The quick draw was never the real strength, it was just what got their attention. Martinez burst in with breaking news. Another corruption network exposed in the Midwest fell apart in weeks because the communities recognized the signs. They used our playbook. The morning sun caught Mike's badge as he addressed the gathered trainees. They called me Quick Draw, thinking it was a joke. But here's what they never understood. The fastest draw isn't what makes a community safe. It's the courage to stand together, the wisdom to recognize threats, and the strength to protect what matters. Thunder rolled across the prairie, but in Millbrook Valley, they'd learned to hear it differently. not as a warning but as a reminder of battles won and lessons learned. The rookie sheriff with the lightning draw had shown America that true protection comes not from the speed of a gun, but from the unbreakable bonds of community. As training continued below, Mike watched the next generation prepare to defend their towns. They practiced quick draws, but they understood the deeper truth, that the strongest defense against corruption isn't found in a holster, but in the hearts of people who refuse to be intimidated. The legacy of Millbrook Valley wasn't just about a sheriff who could outshoot any outlaw. It was about showing the world that when communities stand together, no force of corruption can tear them apart. Thunder rolled one final time, like applause from the heavens themselves. In Millbrook Valley and towns across America, they'd learned the most important lesson of all, that true strength isn't measured by the speed of a draw, but by the courage of a community that stands united against any threat to their freedom and justice. "Look at this," Linda beamed, watching the gathering from her expanded diner's window. "Every one of these officers carries a piece of our story back to their towns. The ripple effect just keeps growing." Mike addressed the assembled crowd in the town square, his badge gleaming in the morning sun. "1 year ago, we stood here facing a different kind of gathering. The Red Riders thought they could break our spirit. Morgan's corruption tried to steal our independence. But they taught us something invaluable, that true strength isn't in weapons or quick draws. It's in the bonds we build with each other." Thompson stepped forward with the latest intelligence. "We've identified similar corruption patterns in 12 other states. But here's the difference. Now we have a network ready to respond. Communities sharing information, supporting each other, standing united against any threat." "Tell them about the youth program," Martinez called out. The newly established junior deputy program had become a model for engaging young people in community protection. Mike watched as Anton Kovac's daughter led a training session for new recruits. "That's our real victory," he said quietly. "Not just stopping corruption, but building something that will protect future generations." The thunder rolled once more across the prairie, but in Millbrook Valley, they no longer listened for warnings. They heard only the echo of triumph, the sound of communities united, standing strong against any storm that dared to threaten their way of life. The rookie sheriff with the quick draw had become more than a defender. He'd become a symbol of hope for small towns everywhere. And in Millbrook Valley, they knew that the fastest gun would never be as powerful as the strongest community. This was the true legacy of their story, not just a tale of a sheriff who could outshoot any outlaw, but a testament to the enduring strength of people who choose to stand together, protecting what matters most with courage, unity, and an unshakable faith in the power of community. 5 years after the Red Riders' defeat, Millbrook Valley had become a beacon of community policing. Mike stood on the roof of the expanded law enforcement center, watching the sunrise over a transformed landscape. "Final report on the national impact," Agent Chen announced. "Over 500 communities have adopted the Millbrook method. Corruption investigations have exposed similar schemes in 15 states. But the numbers don't tell the whole story." Below, the town bustled with activity. The training center hosted law enforcement from 3 countries. Linda's Diner had become a hub for community organizing. The Quick Draw Academy, named despite Mike's protests, taught not just marksmanship but community defense strategies. "Remember when they mocked you as Quick Draw?" Thompson mused, joining him. "Now it's a symbol of something bigger, how small towns can defend themselves against corruption." Mike checked his weapon one last time, the motion now pure ritual. The quick draw was never the real strength. It was just what got their attention. Martinez burst in with breaking news. Another corruption network exposed in the Midwest fell apart in weeks because the communities recognized the signs. They used our playbook. The morning sun caught Mike's badge as he addressed the gathered trainees. They called me Quick Draw, thinking it was a joke. But here's what they never understood. The fastest draw isn't what makes a community safe. It's the courage to stand together, the wisdom to recognize threats, and the strength to protect what matters. Thunder rolled across the prairie, but in Millbrook Valley they'd learned to hear it differently, not as a warning, but as a reminder of battles won and lessons learned. The rookie sheriff with the lightning draw had shown America that true protection comes not from the speed of a gun, but from the unbreakable bonds of community. As training continued below, Mike watched the next generation prepare to defend their towns. They practiced quick draws, but they understood the deeper truth, that the strongest defense against corruption isn't found in a holster, but in the hearts of people who refuse to be intimidated. The legacy of Millbrook Valley wasn't just about a sheriff who could outshoot any outlaw. It was about showing the world that when communities stand together, no force of corruption can tear them apart. Thunder rolled one final time, like applause from the heavens themselves. In Millbrook Valley and towns across America, they'd learned the most important lesson of all, that true strength isn't measured by the speed of a draw, but by the courage of a community that stands united against any threat to their freedom and justice. In the training yard, new recruits practiced more than just quick draws. They learned the Millbrook method, a comprehensive approach to community defense that had revolutionized small-town policing. "Tell them about the international program," Linda urged, bringing coffee to the observation deck. 3 more countries adopted our model last month alone. Mike watched, as his students demonstrated the techniques that had helped take down the Red Riders. But now, they understood, speed was just one small part of the equation. The Community Defense Network spans 4 continents now, Agent Chen reported. Every month we get reports of corruption schemes shut down before they can take root. Communities recognizing the signs, working together, protecting each other. A young deputy raised her hand. "Sheriff Reynolds, what's the most important lesson from the Red Riders incident?" Mike drew his weapon one last time, the motion smooth as silk. But instead of demonstrating his famous quick draw, he slowly holstered it. "The lesson isn't about how fast you can draw. It's about knowing when you don't need to draw at all. True strength isn't in the weapon. It's in the community behind the badge." The thunder rolled across Millbrook Valley one final time. But now it carried a message of triumph, the sound of communities united, standing strong against corruption, protecting what matters most through unity, courage, and an unshakable belief in the power of standing together. In the years to come, they would tell stories about the rookie sheriff with the lightning draw. But in Millbrook Valley, they knew the truth, that the quickest path to justice isn't through the barrel of a gun, but through the hearts of people who choose to stand together, protecting their way of life with something stronger than any weapon, unbreakable community bonds. The legacy of Quick Draw lived on, not in the speed of his draw, but in the strength of communities across the world, united in purpose, protected by truth, and forever changed by the lesson of a small town that dared to stand against corruption and won. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.